Racist cop chokes black woman on court steps, freaks out. When she walks in as the judge. The rough, cold granite of the courthouse wall scraped against Imani Vance's cheek, the grit embedding in her skin. The air was squeezed from her lungs, not just by the thick, uniformed forearm pressing into her throat, but by the sheer, unadulterated hatred in the officer's eyes. Officer Mark Dixon, badge 3819, was screaming, his face a blotchy, furious red, spittle flying from his mouth and hitting her face. "You think you're smart? You think you can just talk back to me? You... He didn't finish the slur, but his eyes screamed it, a vitriolic racist poison. "You're a nothing, you hear me? Just another piece of trash." He punctuated the last word by shoving her head hard against the wall. The sound was a sickening, hollow thud that echoed in her own skull. The crowd of lawyers in expensive suits, clerks juggling coffee, and citizens reporting for jury duty. They either stared, frozen, or worse, quickened their pace, averting their eyes, desperate not to be involved. She was being assaulted, beaten in broad daylight on the steps of the Superior Courthouse, and she was utterly, terrifyingly alone. Officer Dixon didn't know that in 10 minutes she was scheduled to be the one sitting on the high bench, looking down at him. He didn't know he wasn't just assaulting a civilian, he was assaulting the law itself. Before we find out how this officer's world is about to be systematically and surgically dismantled, let me know in the comments. Have you ever been so underestimated that it was almost comical? Hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if you are ready to see justice. Not blind, but with its eyes wide open and with a bruised cheek. Now let's find out how we got here. Judge Imani Vance was not just a judge, she was the judge. At 38, she was the youngest black woman ever appointed to the Superior Court in this city's history. But her appointment was complicated. The city was a powder keg, simmering with distrust and anger. Her predecessor, Judge Alistair Thorne, a man from an old money family, had been forced into early retirement after a sweeping federal corruption scandal, a scandal that had implicated half the 12th precinct, Dixon's precinct, in a massive kickback and evidence tampering scheme. The mayor, in a desperate 11th-hour move, had fast-tracked Imani's appointment, pulling her from a high-profile U.S. Attorney's office in D.C., where she had a near-perfect conviction rate against corrupt politicians. She was the new broom, the outsider, the cleanup crew, meant to burn the old rotten system to the ground and build a new one. She had arrived 2 days ago. Her swearing-in was private, done at City Hall late on a Friday to avoid a media circus, and more importantly, to avoid tipping off the very people she was here to investigate. Today, Monday, was her first official day on the bench. The court docket had been intentionally kept light, just a few procedural motions, and one officer testimony hearing for a drug bust case. The officer scheduled to testify, the linchpin of the prosecution's case, Officer Mark Dixon. Imani wasn't just a lawyer. She was a product of the very system she now presided over. She grew up in the South Side projects, where cops like Dixon were a law unto themselves, a state-sanctioned occupying force. She had seen her uncle wrongfully convicted on a bogus charge, her cousins profiled and humiliated for driving a clean car, her neighbors treated as suspects, not citizens, in their own homes. She had clawed her way to Yale Law, not to escape her past, but to one day return and destroy the machine that created it. She knew the law, every loophole, every precedent, but more importantly, she knew the game. That morning, she had dressed with meticulous care, not in her robes, but in her civilian uniform, a perfectly tailored yet understated black blazer, a white silk blouse, and her hair in a neat professional crown of braids. She looked like a lawyer, which, she knew, was a level of ambiguity that cops like Dixon hated. She had bypassed her assigned parking in the secure judicial garage, deciding to walk the last 3 blocks. She wanted to see the city. She wanted to feel the pavement. She needed to remember why she was here. She needed the smell of the bus exhaust and the hurried, anxious energy of the courthouse steps to fuel the fire in her gut. She was just another face in the crowd. Until she wasn't. It started simply, as it always does. A homeless man, clearly unwell and clutching a tattered sleeping bag, was shouting on the corner, arguing with a ghost. He wasn't hurting anyone, just a sad, broken symptom of the city's failed policies. As Imani passed, the man stumbled, dropping his small bag of possessions. Imani, seeing the man's distress, paused. "Sir, are you all right? Let me help you with that." She bent down to help him gather his scattered belongings, a tattered book, a half-eaten apple, a few photographs. That's when the cruiser squealed to the curb, its tires screaming. Officer Dixon and his partner, a younger, nervous-looking cop named Evans, got out. Dixon didn't approach the man. He immediately targeted Imani. "Step away from him. What are you doing? Giving him money for his next fix?" Dixon's voice was a lazy, arrogant drawl, loaded with assumption and contempt. Imani stood up slowly, her hands empty and visible. "No, officer. I'm helping him pick up his things." He stumbled. Dixon's eyes raked over her. The expensive suit, the braids. His cop brain, pickled in prejudice, made its calculation. Bleeding heart public defender, probably from out of town. "You're interfering," he sneered. "This man is a public nuisance, and you're encouraging him. Move along." "He's a human being, officer," Imani said, her voice calm, her U.S. attorney's voice, a voice that had cross-examined senators. "He needs social services, not a badge in his face." It was the word officer. The way she said it, calm, intelligent, unimpressed. It was a challenge. Dixon hated that. He hated people like her who looked at him and didn't show fear. "You got a smart mouth, don't you? Think you're a lawyer?" He sneered, stepping closer, invading her space. "Let me see your bar card." "I don't have to show you my bar card," Imani said, standing her ground. "I'm a private citizen on a public sidewalk and I've committed no crime. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to get to court." "Oh, you haven't?" Dixon smiled, a terrifying, empty gesture. "Well, you just did. Interfering with a police investigation. You're obstructing." "That's a ridiculous and false charge, Officer Dixon," Imani said, her eyes flicking to his name tag. The use of his name was the final straw. That, combined with her calmness, her intelligence, her refusal to be intimidated, broke his paper-thin control. "You don't get to tell me the law!" he roared. He grabbed her arm. "You're under arrest!" Imani instinctively pulled her arm back. "Get your hands off me! I am not under arrest for standing on a sidewalk!" The second she pulled back, Dixon's entire demeanor shifted. The game was over. The violence was here. "Resisting!" he bellowed. The single magic word that would justify everything that came next, the word he screamed for the benefit of his partner's body cam, which he'd probably just turned on. He shoved her, hard. She stumbled off the curb, her ankle twisting painfully on the cobblestone. She cried out. But he wasn't done. He was an animal now, all rage and ego. He grabbed her by the blazer, his fist tangling in her silk blouse, and hurled her against the cold granite wall of the courthouse. Her head cracked against the stone. Stars exploded in her vision and she tasted copper. And that's when we came in. With Officer Mark Dixon's forearm on her throat, screaming at her, his spittle hitting her face. His partner, Evans, finally spoke, his voice high and panicked. "Dixon, ease up, Jesus, we're on the courthouse steps. There are cameras, everyone is filming." "So what?" Dixon screamed, his face spittled high on his own power. "Let him watch, it's policy, she assaulted me, she's resisting." He reached for his cuffs, fumbling with them. "You're going to jail, bitch. You're going to see what real power is." Imani, her vision tunneling, her throat on fire, her mind a screaming siren of rage, forced herself to focus. Be patient. Be smarter. She didn't fight back. She didn't struggle. She made herself a witness. She documented. Officer Mark Dixon, badge 3819, assault on a civilian, false arrest, public intimidation. 9:15 a.m., multiple witnesses, visible bruising to left cheek and throat. Partner, Evans, badge 5512, failure to intervene. She was building the federal case in her head. "Dixon, what the hell are you doing?" A new voice, sharp and terrified, cut through the air. A captain. Captain Miller, Dixon's boss, was running down the steps, his face pale, his tie flapping. "Get your hands off her! What is wrong with you?" Dixon, seeing his superior, instantly released the pressure. Imani crumpled to the ground, coughing, gasping, holding her throat. "She assaulted me, Cap!" Dixon lied immediately, puffing his chest, the adrenaline still pumping. "She was interfering, resisting. A total psycho." The captain looked at Imani, a small black woman in a torn suit, now covered in street dirt, a bright red handprint on her throat and a bruise already forming on her cheek. Then he looked at the half-dozen lawyers and clerks standing frozen, all filming with their phones. "You're an idiot, Dixon," the captain hissed, his voice low and furious. "Go, now. Back to the precinct. Evans, you drive. We'll sort this out." He turned to Imani, offering a hand to help her up. "Ma'am," he said, "I am so sorry. He's a hothead." Imani just looked at his hand, then at his face. She refused the hand, using the wall to pull herself up, her entire body shaking with a cold, contained fury. "We'll get you medical attention," the captain offered, clearly just wanting the situation to go away. We'll handle Dixon." Imani finally spoke, her voice a raw, painful rasp. "No," she adjusted her torn blazer. I have to be in court." The captain, relieved to be rid of her, nodded. "Right, of course. Go clean up." He hurried away, already crafting the internal report in his head, the one that would bury the incident, the one that would protect his man. What do you think? Dixon's captain just saw his officer commit a felony assault and let him go, just to handle it. Is the captain just as guilty as the cop? Type 1, if the captain is a coward who is protecting a corrupt system. Type 2, if he was just trying to de-escalate a bad situation. Let me know in the comments. Because what happens next is pure, unadulterated robe and gavel justice. Imani stumbled into the courthouse, past the security guards who suddenly found their shoes fascinating. She bypassed the public entrance, her heart hammering not from fear but from a glacial rage. She used her new high-level keycard to enter the secure judicial wing, a place no cop could follow. Her new clerk, a young, earnest woman named Sarah, was waiting with a stack of files. She saw Imani and her hands flew to her mouth, scattering the files across the floor. "Oh my God! Judge Vance! What happened to you? Your face, your throat, your blouse is torn." I had a disagreement with an officer about the law," Imani rasped, walking straight into her private chambers. The opulent, dark, wood-paneled room was a stark contrast to the violence and filth outside. "I'm calling the police," Sarah said, grabbing the phone. "Don't," Imani said, her voice echoing with a new, hard authority that made Sarah freeze. "They're already here." She looked at her reflection in the glass of a framed law degree, the ripped blouse, the ugly red handprint on her throat, the blooming purple bruise on her cheekbone. She looked like a victim. She looked like every woman who had ever come into her courtroom, full of stories of abuse that no one believed. "Sarah," she said, "get me the new judge robe, the one with the high starched collar." "Judge, you should go to the hospital. You need to file a report." "I said get me the robe," Imani commanded. "And my gavel, and a glass of water with no ice." She went into her private bathroom. She washed the spittle and dirt from her face. She did not cover the bruise. She wore the bruise. It was Exhibit A. She pulled her braids back, retying them with a fierce, practiced calm. Then she walked out. Sarah was holding the heavy black robe. Imani slid her arms in. The robe settled on her shoulders, a familiar heavy weight. It was her armor. The high, starched collar covered the red, angry marks on her throat, a perfect mask. She was no longer Imani Vance, the victim on the steps. She was Judge Vance, the authority on the bench. "What's first on the docket, Sarah?" she asked. Her voice, though raw, was now the voice of the law. Sarah looked at the day's schedule, her face pale. "Judge, it's a procedural hearing, a motion to suppress from the Public Defender's Office, Case 309B, the People versus Simmons. The testifying officer is Officer Mark Dixon." Imani felt a cold, perfect, terrible stillness settle over her. It wasn't just justice, it was poetry. "Good," Judge Vance said, picking up her heavy oak gavel. "Let's get to work." "All rise," the bailiff's voice boomed. "The Superior Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Imani Vance presiding." The courtroom, a mix of tired PDs, an arrogant ADA, and a few defendants in orange jumpsuits, stood. Officer Mark Dixon was in the back, leaning against the wall, laughing about something with his partner, Evans. He hadn't even bothered to sit. He was here to lie on his report, get the evidence admitted, and go home. Easy money. He didn't even look up as the judge entered. Imani walked to the bench, the high collar feeling like a brace, the bruise on her cheek feeling like a badge. She sat. "Be seated," she said. Her voice was a rasp, but amplified by the microphone, it sounded like a low growl. Dixon, hearing the strange, damaged voice, finally looked up. He froze. He was looking at the woman. The same woman. The one from the sidewalk. The one in the suit. But she was on the bench. She was in the robe. His brain tried to make sense of it. It was a joke, a prank, a costume. It couldn't be. "Good morning, counsel," Imani said, her eyes sweeping the room, past Dixon, ignoring him, her face a mask of judicial calm. "We are here for Case 309B, the People versus Simmons. I see a motion to suppress evidence based on a questionable traffic stop." The young ADA stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We have the arresting officer here, Officer Mark Dixon. The state calls Officer Dixon to the stand." Dixon stood up. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. His legs were shaking. His partner, Evans, was white as a sheet, staring at the floor. Officer Dixon," Imani said, her eyes finally locking on him. A predator's gaze. "Please approach the stand." He walked like a robot, his boots leaden. He was sworn in, his hand trembling so badly he could barely raise it. He sat. "Please state your name and badge number for the record," Imani said, her voice a silken, dangerous whisper. "Of Officer Mark Dixon, badge 3819. "Thank you, officer," Imani said. She leaned forward, the microphone picking up every icy word. "Now, before we discuss this case, I have a preliminary matter. I am new to this city, new to this bench, and I had a very educational welcome this morning. Right outside this building, in fact." The ADA looked confused. The PD looked intrigued. Dixon looked like he was about to pass out. "Officer Dixon," Imani said, "you look a little pale. Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost, or perhaps just a piece of trash." Dixon's mouth opened. A small, wet, gasping sound came out. "This morning, officer," Imani continued, her voice rising, the controlled rage now evident, "I was physically assaulted on the steps of this courthouse. I was choked. I was beaten. I was slammed into a wall. I was threatened by an officer of this city's police force, an officer with badge 3819. The courtroom exploded. The ADA gasped. The PD shot to his feet. "Your Honor, bailiff," Imani commanded, her voice like steel. "Officer Dixon is not a witness. He is a defendant. He is a flight risk, as he has already fled the scene of a crime this morning. He is a clear and present danger to the community he is sworn to protect. Take him into custody, now." The bailiff, a large man who had seen it all, looked at Dixon's panicked white face, then at the judge's bruised black one. He unclipped his service weapon. "Dixon, stand up! Hands on the table, now!" "You can't do this!" Dixon shrieked, finding his voice a high-pitched, terrified sound. "It's a lie! She assaulted me! She's corrupt! This is a conflict of interest! You can't be the judge in your own case!" "A conflict of interest?" Imani said, standing up, the full, towering weight of her office behind her. "You are accused of assaulting a sitting judge, officer. This isn't a conflict. This is a crime. I am not presiding over your case. I am testifying to your arrest. And you're right. I can't be the judge on this case." She looked at the court reporter. "Let the record show that I am recusing myself. Let the record also show that the defendant, Officer Dixon, is being charged with aggravated assault, battery, false arrest, and deprivation of rights under color of law." You can't!" Dixon yelled as the bailiff cuffed him. "I'm a cop. I have immunity." "Immunity?" Imani said, and for the first time she almost smiled. "You assaulted a sitting judge, which is a state felony. But you made a fatal, career-ending mistake. You assaulted me before my U.S. attorney's credentials officially expired. They don't expire until midnight tonight. You didn't just assault a judge, you idiot. You assaulted a federal prosecutor. And for that, there is no immunity." As Dixon was dragged out, screaming and protesting, Imani looked at his partner, Officer Evans. "Officer Evans, you are a material witness. You are being detained for failure to intervene. I suggest you find your voice and your conscience, because the U.S. Attorney's Office is on its way and they love a good deal." Evans just nodded, his eyes wide with terror, and fainted. Imani watched them go. She sat back down, her hands shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. Her clerk, Sarah, approached, holding a note. "Judge, that was amazing, but there's a problem. The captain, Captain Miller, the one from outside, he's on the line. He says he's friends with the police commissioner. He says you just declared war on the entire 12th precinct, and they're going to bury you." Imani looked at the note. Then she looked at the bruise on her face, reflected in the polished wood of her new bench. Dixon wasn't just a bad apple. He was a soldier, and she had just walked into the middle of a war. "Let them try," Imani whispered. "This isn't their courthouse anymore. It's mine." What happens when an entire precinct, backed by the commissioner, goes to war with a single, untouchable judge? Subscribe. Because the real fight is just beginning.